is Nigerian, we have not assuaged the Easterners enough. And we've got to do that. And the earlier we do that, the better. That is what is giving rise to all this thing you call IPOB and ESN or whatever, because there isn't enough proper national reconciliation. And leadership should take what's it called, the blame for all that. We should address that adequately. And we know how to address it if we want to address it, such that most of this agitation for self-rule can be doused. There is the need. Nigeria makes a better country when we are all together and one. The bigger we are, look, the so-called diversity is our strength. If we begin to lose that diversity, I'm afraid we are finished. We'll just become like each of these other countries that are around us. So we must address that. Haven't spoken about the civil war and the need for us to, assuage other parts of the country. We must also address this issue. The second main national issue to us, as far as security is concerned, is what is ongoing. The insurgency in the Northeast, and of course, all this banditry and so on. These things were unknown to us. How come we degenerated to this level? Was it laxity, lack of proper attention to security matters, and so on? And I would say yes, if we're asking that as a question. Yes, it was. How come our police is not well equipped to be able to address internal security issues, which of course is its statutory responsibility. The soldiers have been drafted in now to, as far as I'm concerned, play police role all over the place, which shouldn't be. The military should hide in their barracks, not seen. When you see a military vehicle outside, you shiver. That should be the mentality. But today the military has even become like the police, if not custom or immigration, which is wrong. We should please try to address the whole concept of policing, and then we put things in proper place. We must address the police, equip them enough to play their role. There are several issues within the national security purview, so to speak. And if we have to ensure that we are coming on board with a fresh reform template, it will address all this. There is what I call the big five, okay, within the national security ambit. Funding, manpower, logistics and equipment, training, and finally, motivation and welfare. If you address these 5 issues, I can assure you, Benga, you have addressed 65 to 70% of the problems, because that document will speak at every point, and we shall not be so bedeviled with what we have. Right now, we need to really inject funding into our security and make sure that some of this fine crop of leadership we have in the military are able to give us the sort of result we want in the field.
Just to touch on your last point and fine leadership, you did speak to the point that you're happy with President Tinubu's appointments as far as the service chiefs are concerned, but we saw something quite different that we're not used to. The Office of the National Security Advisor in the recent past normally is held by retired military personnel, but we have Mr. Ribadu, who's the National Security Advisor now, with no military background. Is that a cause for concern? What do you make of his appointment as NSA?
It could be a cause for concern, and it may not be. Actually, that question is one area I always try to avoid because if we look back to other, to senior climes, you would agree with me that some of the NSAs we've had have not really been military men, but they've had a wealth of experience when it comes to security. Look at Condoleezza in the United States and so on. She used to be an NSA in the U.S., within the U.S. system. And we have a few others like that. The gentleman, Ribadu, has some wealth of military, police experience behind him. He has risen to the top ranks. He has been exposed by way of intelligence and so on. We may give it to him, given the fact also that prerogative for the appointment of such a person lies within the commander-in-chief. And if that is his preference, let's go along. Rather than criticizing, let's see how we can support the system to move on. My very first comment on that, I spelled out all this, and I don't want to go into all that again. I really would want to see myself as somebody who's trying to lend some level of support to see how the system can run, okay, and so on. We just hope things at the end of the day will not be disrupted again like we all look the way the situation is unfolding. And what do I mean? You know, the Nigerian election system or our selection system now is now not determined by the polls, it's now determined by the courts. So we never could know what the courts will say tomorrow. But if that does not go the other way around, fine, we'll support the system we see and move on. And that is just it.
Okay.
I think we should not belabor that issue of NSA.
Okay.
Let's just move on.
I just want to make a quick correction. Earlier on, I was Nasarawa State that I mentioned, but those kidnappings of young female students happened in Zamfara State.
Yeah.
Now, Colonel Stan-Labo, I want to go back to what you talked about because that was a question I penned down for you, this military sort of versus the police. We understand what the security architecture should be. Military is in their barracks, responsible for protecting the country's borders and engagement of external threats. But we've seen them here in Nigeria possibly having engagement and operations in probably 30 or if not more states across the country as it may be. But also in recent times, this is a Nigeria in West Africa that is surrounded now by countries, at least 2 or 3, 4 countries that have engaged in military coup in recent times. We also have the threats coming from the Sahel and these terrorist organizations that are coming down through the Sahel and trying to find their foothold. We also know what we heard about how they're making incursions into Nigeria and sort of the arrangement and I guess I would say the connections between all these multiple groups. So this is a two-layered question. Let's start with the external arrangement and the external situation right now. What do you think President Tinubu needs to do to make sure he's safeguarding Nigeria's borders, given the current set of circumstances Nigeria is sitting in the middle of?
Well, I really hope I understand your question. What is Mr. President supposed to do?
Yes.
To ensure that our